does transaction with monetary is considered a financial institution. So our first module with Mr. Keith Checkley will be enterprise-wide risk management. Then module 2 with Mr. Mike Hill, we'll do credit and operational risk. Then we'll do investment and liquidity risk. Module 3, market risk and financial instruments. Module 4. Module 5 will be regulations and compliance risk. And then module 6 will be reputational risk and corporate governance. Now I'm going to go ahead and share the schedule. Usually we do follow the schedule to a T. But do keep in mind that schedules do change, especially when we head into the hurricane months of July and August. Okay, folks? So just be aware of that. But you want to keep on schedule, hopefully finish by Saturday, August 27 will be your final exam. You will have an assignment that we will give you probably during module 3 for you to upload to us by Friday, June 24th. This assignment, I think it's comprised of 2,000 words, give or take 5% more or less, and it's 40% of your final grade. And your final exam is a multiple choice computer based, which is 60 questions, which comprise about 60% of your final grade. As you can see, hopefully everybody has the schedule. If not, I will email it to you. As I said, we will be sending you case studies. I think I do owe you some for this class. So I'll be forwarding that shortly as soon as Mr. Checkley comes on. And then today we're going to do some introductions. Hopefully everybody's camera and microphone is working, please. We would like to see you and hear from you today as to why you joined the class and what you hope to gain from it. Now, if you have any questions, I am the logistical guy behind everything, the administrator. Please give me a call. I did put my cell phone in the email, just in case you have a problem logging in or you can't, or for any other reasons. Please do not hesitate to give me a call. Hopefully I have covered everything. Is there any questions? Does anybody have any questions so far for me? No? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our international partner, Mr. Keith Checkley, who will be your lecturer for module 1. Mr. Checkley, it's all yours. Oh, sorry, Mr. Checkley, we can't hear you. Sorry, we could hear you a few minutes ago, but let's retry it. Or maybe it's me. Can everybody hear me? Can somebody answer say they hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't hear Mr. Checkley.
Okay.
I think it's mute. It's still on.
It shouldn't be.
Yes. You're loud and clear, my good man.
You can hear me now, yeah.
Loud and clear.
The microphone keeps switching between the microphone on my camera and the microphone on my computer. So sorry about that, folks. Yeah, so in a moment or two, if you can get ready, Miguel will take you, in a sequence which is best known to him. But we'd ask you just to say, who you are, which organization you're from, what's your experience working in risk, or if you're brand new to risk, and then important for us, what are you hoping to get out of the program? So we'll be starting in a moment with the introductions. So myself, in terms of Caribbean work, we first came to the Caribbean as long ago as 1989, which is a long time ago. And our first port of call was actually in Jamaica, where 3 of us came from the UK, and we did a program for the Jamaica Institute of Bankers, which rebranded the same as Bahamas did, to GIFs. So some of you will be familiar with the GIFs programs. And then we did advanced credit, treasury management, and trade finance. And pleased to say the programs went well, and Jamaica had taken the opportunity at that time to try and invite persons from right across the Caribbean. And you all know how difficult traveling was across the Caribbean, and of course has been difficult again recently. But we had persons, coming from as far away as Trinidad and Tobago, right across to Jamaica, people from Bahamas, St. Lucia, frankly, the people that you expect, St. Kitts and Barbados, Antigua, of course, as well. And we were fortunate in that the chief credit officer from Bank of Bahamas at the time was Paul McWeeny, who later went on to become chief executive. Paul asked me towards the end of the advanced credit program in Jamaica, he said, well, have you ever been to Bahamas? I said, no. He said, well, would you like to come? Because he was on the council of the Bahamas Institute of Bankers. And I said, yes. And I said, well, I'll come as soon as you want me. So that took us to Bahamas. And then also we had, just trying to remember his name, Blanchard from NCB, National Commercial Bank of St. Lucia, which is now the Bank of St. Lucia. And he invited us across to St. Lucia. And we had people all the way, 5 persons from Trinidad Tobago, from the Republic Bank. And the chap there, he invited us across to Trinidad. So I won't go on and on about it, but it was just to give you an idea how all this started. And now, of course, the key date for us was in 2004, when we signed an executive development program with the Bahamas Institute to try and promote more executive level programs for banking and finance professionals in the Caribbean. And pleased to say, that's been successful for a number of years. That agreement was 2004. And the first rollout, Miguel always corrects me on this, it was either 2005 or 2007. Which one was it, Miguel? We can't hear you now. Your mic's off. But
My
anyway,
apologies.
yeah.
Actually, our first class was in 2007 for the risk manager.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been running, ever since, and also out of Jamaica, primarily in that part of the Caribbean, and then more recently out of Trinidad and Tobago, where persons come across from Guyana to Trinidad, or go on Zoom. And very pleased to say, in conjunction with Bahamas in 2007, that was the first internet style delivery. Zoom wasn't invented then, WebEx wasn't invented then, and we used an American program called Instant Presenter, which Miguel discovered coming out of California. And that was really successful to start with. And it was really great because Bahamas, has lots of different islands, and the people were able to come online just as you're doing today to take advantage of training where, they couldn't all travel into Nassau. So currently we've got the Certified International Risk Manager, we've got the Certified International Financial Planner, and we've got the Certified Credit Professional. And also more recently, we've been working on a program which we piloted some time ago called Certified Wealth Manager, which is going to be very, very important for certain, parts of the Caribbean where you're trying to attract and have attracted successfully in the past high net worth people, which is a global expanding market. So you can watch the press for that one. That will be coming along shortly. Then also 2 very short style programs from the Chartered Banker Institute in the UK. One is Green and Sustainable Finance, which fits very much into the background discussions we've heard recently from COP26 International Conference, on climate change and climate risk. And then also, I don't think Miguel's seen this yet, but coming out soon will be a short program again from the Chartered Bank Institute on climate risk. Have you seen that yet, Miguel?
No, only the
no,
green finance. I haven't, no, I
You've
haven't
seen
seen
green.
time.
You haven't seen climate risk yet. Now that's
No, I haven't.
very new because in 2 weeks' time, there'll be some delegations from the United Nations visiting the Caribbean. So I'll let you have more information on that to distribute when we get the extra information. So basically, the program that I'll be delivering over the 3 weeks, which is module 1, will take a very wide international perspective and try and give you as many as we can informations about best risk management practices. And as Miguel well knows, these are not rules and regulations. So it's not like Sarbanes-Oxley out of the USA, you know, where you've got to obey the rules. What we'll discover during our program is a lot of recommended, as the key word, recommended risk management practices. So more on that in a few minutes. Now just pass over to Miguel to get you just to make those self-introductions. So, you know, who you are, which organization you're working for, what's your experience in risk, and also, you know, what you're hoping to get out of this internationally accredited risk management program. Thank you. Back over to Miguel.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Checkley. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our internationally accredited program. Well, I'm going to call off the names, but as I see them on my screen, could we start with, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Corey Adderley?
Yes, that's correct. That's
Very
correct.
good,
Good morning, everyone. My name is Corey Adderley. I'm employed at the Central Bank of the Bahamas.
Right.
I'm kind of new to this, so definitely I want to get a broad perspective of what it all entails, the scope of it, and also from a financial services standpoint. I work within the security environment, but I wanted to get a better appreciation based on the work environment that I'm currently in. So that's the gist of it.
Yes, well, Corey, we will have certain sections where we do emphasize, you know, the role of the supervisors and the role of the supervisors from the central bank. So I'm sure you'll find there's lots of material in there that will help you. And we've had a lot of people from the central bank in the past. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, correct. We actually wrote this same risk manager was written in conjunction with the central bank. We had consulted them when designing this program.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, can we go on to Chanel Lightborn?
Good day. Well, as you know, my name is Chanel Lightborn. I'm a personal banking officer at Scotiabank.
Right.
I've been in banking for quite some time, so I'm just hoping to, I guess, learn all I can in regards to risk management and hopefully see where this takes me further in my career.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. Can we move on to Orlando Dean?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Orlando Dean. I am presently employed at the Grand Lucayan Hotel. I'm a retired police officer, and this is something new that I'm trying to stay abreast of what's going on in the world today in risk management.
Excellent. Yes, we had a very senior executive from the police many years ago. Who was that again, Miguel?
I think he is I don't know if he's Chief Inspector Emmerich Seymour. And
yes,
also,
I know.
Yeah, and also head of the credit union, Mr. Ricardo King.
Yes, I know both of them.
Yeah, and we have had one or two other police officers definitely join this program.
Yes.
So welcome.
Yes. Welcome aboard.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, can we go to Mr. Delasi Delaney?
Hi. Good morning. Good morning. Yes.
Morning.
My name is
You're breaking up. If you can't get a better signal, you could just put something in the chat box.
I've been working on
Yeah, I see he's trying to use both.
risk
Is
and
he?
compliance.
Hi, can you hear me now?
That's better, yes.
Of the last 10 years. I'm currently employed with the Bank of Bahamas in the role of compliance manager and the
All right.
deputy money laundering reporting.
Excellent. We got you now. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to the program.
Okay, can we go on to LaShawn Edwards?
Hi, good morning. My name is LaShawn. I am also employed at the Central Bank. I am employed in the research department
Right.
with responsibility for balance of payments. However, I also contribute to the financial stability report that we release on an annual basis. So I'm hoping that this course will give me a broader understanding, I guess, of the financial services sector in terms of risk. And I'm really looking forward to just learning some new things and learning and growing. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, during the program, we'll give you a number of further reading references and also web link references, which you will find, particularly instructive on the risk management side. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move on to Narendra Roma?
Oh my gosh.
Gosh.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes the visual background
Yeah.
doesn't work as well as it should.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
Sorry, we shouldn't be laughing. We apologize for that, but we've had so much experience of it ourselves. Yeah. Yeah.
That's okay.
Not a problem.
My name is Narendra Romer. I'm employed at the Utilities Regulation and Competition Authority. I serve in the capacity of risk and compliance officer. So
Yes.
my intention of taking this course is to get a broader understanding of risk in terms of identifying, monitoring, and managing the risk and being able to use that in my line of work.
Excellent. Yes, what we'll do is, as the program progresses, we'll give you templates to help you build up a risk register. For example, if you don't have one, some persons call it a risk log, where you can identify and look at methods of risk mitigation. So there'll be plenty of practical takeaways from the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Narendra.
Thank you. Can we move on to Dimitri Maki?
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Dimitri Maki. I am currently employed at Scotiabank Bahamas as a branch manager. I took this course to get a better understanding or a broad understanding of credit risk. Of course, I want to learn a different type of risk and how it applies to financial banking. Also looking to increase my knowledge and, of course, credit application and what to look for as far as taking on risks to ensure that the bank is protected at the end of the day.
Excellent. Yes, we'll have on module 2. Module 2 is credit and operational risk. So we'll do a sort of deeper dive in module 2 onto credit analysis techniques and frameworks that should be of assistance to you. Some will be similar to probably what you've got already in Scotiabank, but there will be some new things in there, looking at credit from a slightly more wider perspective. Yeah, so welcome, Dimitri. Thank you.
Before we go to Mr. Randy Taylor, I just want to let everybody know that the majority of our lecturers at the Institute are also an alumni of the Institute. So folks, keep that in mind. Once you've completed some of our courses, you will have the opportunity to teach and lecture for us, like Mr. Randy Taylor, who we'll introduce him next. He is also a lecturer here at the Bahamas Institute of Financial Services. I think he lectures on anti-money laundering and compliance. So let's hear from Mr. Randy Taylor, please.
Good morning, all.
I'm presently employed at the Teachers and Credit Salary Workers Credit Union. I'm head of compliance there. Like Miguel said, that I would have assisted based on doing some lecture work there. I've worked in compliance for the past 12 years. Prior to that, 8 years at the Financial Intelligence Unit. And 6 years prior to that in the Criminal Investigation Department and the Fraud Department, the Police Department. So I have roughly about 25 years. But it's good to, what my expectation is to get foundation, nuts and bolts as to this credit risk. There's some weakness areas that I'm weak in, and I've admitted that. So that's why I enrolled in the course to shore up my weaknesses.
Yeah, but we can draw on your strengths as well when we're looking at anti-money laundering and fraud cases. And you'll be pleased to know we do have some of those, including the very recent one you might have seen out of the UK, which was a real shock to everyone, was the National Westminster Bank just a few months ago. I don't know if you saw that publicity, but this is very, very new. And the finance authorities, it's the first time they'll have taken this really deep investigation into what's been happening at the National Westminster Bank, which actually, if you turn the clock back, probably more than 20 years ago, National Westminster was the largest bank in the UK at the time. Now, of course, it's the HSBC. Okay, thank you. And we'll be drawing on your anti-money laundering experience as we go along. And Miguel knows a lot about anti-money laundering, don't you, Miguel?
A little bit here. Okay. All right. Thanks, Randy.
Yeah, thanks.
Welcome aboard. All right. Let's move on to Miss Galen Sawyer.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Galen Sawyer. I've been in banking for over 13 years. I'm currently a relationship manager at RBC. I just transitioned into that role in summer of last year. Prior to that, I would have spent 13 years with Scotiabank. So my current experience with risk is credit risk and operational risk. And the purpose of me taking this course is my desire to just strengthen in those two areas and of course, expand on my knowledge in business risk.
Excellent. Yes, that'll be really good. Well, we'll have some good inputs on business risk, particularly in module 2 from Mike, and then also business risk coming through in the later modules, on regulations and corporate governance issues, looking at the role of the board of directors, etc. So welcome to the program. Miguel, I see from Darcy, there's a message in the chat box. Can you see that?
I think it says, yeah, he was since he had some problems with
yeah, you got the picture. That was before I found out you heard me.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Darcy. Thanks.
Okay, can we move on to Miss Bria Brennan?
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Maria Brennan. I'm employed with Bank of the Bahamas. I'm in charge of collections there. Just hoping that the course prepares me for future risk-related opportunities.
Guess what, Misha? It has your name. Misha Ferguson. How do I come out? Because you never signed off, right?
Miguel, can you sort us out here? We can't hear you. We can't hear you, Miguel.
My apologies again.
Hello.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thanks, Bria. Bria is also an alumni. She's a certified international financial planner as well at the Institute.
Excellent.
She got her designation quite some time ago, I think about 10 years ago.
All right.
So welcome aboard, Bria, once again.
Yeah.
Let's go on to Miss Cummings. She's also an alumni at the Institute.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you so much. Hope everyone's doing well. My name is Helga Michelle Cummings. I am an employee of Scotia Wealth Management, where I serve as an accountant officer. Pretty soon I'll be transitioning over to the compliance department. And because of the many layers that comes along with being a compliance officer, it's best to upgrade and enhance your skills in as many areas as possible. I just recently acquired my ICA, where I have an international certification in AML and also corporate governance. And with the risk management designation, it would help me strengthen in areas that I may be weak in so that I can perform at my best when I transition over into the department.
Yeah, excellent, Helga. Yes, what you'll find is when we look at the Basel II main flow chart going back to 2004, you'll see we show pictorially exactly where compliance fits in and how it is a very, very wide role and becoming more, more wider. That's not the right word, but more complex. A number of new areas to look at. So we'll definitely help you with that widening of perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thanks, Helga. We also have another alumni of the Institute, Ms. Indira. What side? Hi, Indira. You're still on mute. Just unmute yourself. Not a problem. It happens to all of us.
Well, and you.
Sorry.
Yeah, especially me.
Yeah. I'm currently employed at UBP, Nassau branch, working in the capacity of operations administrator. I took this particular course to gain a broad and in-depth knowledge of operations, credit, and compliance risk, and to be more of an asset to the company.
Excellent, excellent. Well done. Yes, you get a broad perspective of all the risks. Sometimes we call it a galaxy of risks because there's so many risks out there, and then there's so many unexpected risks. Thank you.
Thank you, Indira. Let's move on to Ms. Jessica Murray.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Murray. I currently work at FTX Digital Markets as a Chief Compliance Officer. And so you can imagine the number of risks in the digital asset space. And so I just want to join this course. This has been on my radar for about 2 years. So I got the chance to take it. Like many of my other colleagues, to get a good understanding of risk management enterprise-wide, rather. And also former alumni of BIFS and the ICA diploma program in risk governance and compliance. So,
excellent.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to the program. 2 years is quite a waiting time. Yeah, but you made it. Welcome. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Can we move on to Ms. Alexandra Cooper?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexandra Cooper. I'm employed with Bank of the Bahamas in the capacity of a legal officer. So the purpose of me taking this course is just to upgrade and enhance in terms of the risk that can actually impact the legal department and just for future growth and development in the financial institutions.
Excellent. Yeah, it's really good to have someone from legal, particularly on one of the case studies. But I'm not going to get you worried. We'll only take your informal opinion on the particular case study that we look at. So don't worry about it. Welcome.
Yes,
welcome. Okay, can we move on to Mr. Donald Jones?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I joined looking to join this program to really keep fresh with the emerging risks that are happening out there and to understand the best practices in dealing with them.
Yep.
Currently, I'm employed at CIBC First Caribbean as head of the personal credit risk department. And I've been there now for just over a year. Before that, I would have been at another financial institution
Mhm.
in a similar role.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donald.
Thank you.
Welcome to the program. Yes, you'll get a wider perspective on the program. Excellent. Thanks.
We have another alumni of the Institute and also a graduate of the Certified International Financial Planner Program, Mr. Rithman McKinnon.
Good morning, everyone. Rithman McKinney. I'm currently with Scotiabank, been there about 16 years. My current role, I'm the manager for merchant services and cash management.
Right.
I have minimal knowledge as relates to my previous roles with exposure to some credit risk and some operational risk. The purpose of me taking this course is really to deepen my knowledge as relates to the various risks, as well as to stay marketable in this ever-changing environment.
Excellent. Yes, well, you find it's a very challenging program, and the program with extensive materials, as you'll see. I'm not too sure how much Miguel has sent you already. Did you send the full manual?
I sent the full manual, but your case studies.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
No,
so
but
there will be extra case studies.
Yes.
In addition to the manual, but you can see from the basic manual, it's over 300 pages. So there's lots and lots of information in there. Thank you.
And each lecturer do send their own case studies. So
yeah,
there's more material to come.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Can we go to Ms. Shanti Hannah?
Good morning, everyone. I am currently employed at Scotiabank. I've been there for the last 6 years. I'm currently in the role as a personal banking officer. I'm taking the course to better understand how my role in banking contributes, I guess, locally and internationally, and also to further my career in the coming future as a credit risk manager.
Yes, yes. Well, we'll, as I said earlier, within module 2, you'll go a lot deeper into some commercial credits and other issues. So I think you'll find it beneficial to the program to broaden your experience. Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. Last but not least, I believe she is an alumni of the Institute. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Young, but let's move on to Ms. Rolanda Young.
Hi, good morning, all. I've been with the institution a few years back, way back, maybe back in 2001 or so.
Correct. Yes.
Yes, I have no knowledge of risk. However, like everybody else, I'm trying to get that full in-depth understanding of how it affects the institution. I work at Banco Santander, and I've been there for the last 21 years this year. And I've worked in numerous capacities. And I'm looking to gain that understanding of how it affects the institution in various ways to mitigate or prevent the threat of risk, and how to analyze and evaluate risk. So all of that in-depth knowledge would be useful for my career, and never know where my career is headed down the line. So
sure, yes, and we'll have case studies on this, Rolanda, where we'll look at the risks within a financial institution and then see what effect the risk will have on the institution overall. Despite the good efforts of all the persons working there, some of the risks can be very, very severe and severely affect the liquidity of the organization. Thanks. Thank you. So the only one that's missing, I think, Miguel, was Shanta from St. Lucia, but she didn't manage to get through the email trail. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll give her a call on Monday.
Sure. Thank you. So the program is recorded for any sections that you miss, and if you missed, one of the sessions during the program, don't worry, because Miguel, well, he's already given you the domain on YouTube where they are, so you can sit and look at the recordings. And if you have trouble sleeping at night, just click on one of our recordings, and before too long you'll be nicely asleep, and then the next morning hopefully you will remember something about the risks that we've been discussing. Okay, now we just need to make a slight transition here where I get the manual on the screen. So are you going to put that in the Dropbox, Miguel? Is that the easiest way? No. Or are you going to give me the facility to share?
Yeah, you should be able to share, please. Yes, right. You should be able to share. Oh, please.
Let me try them. Yes. Let's see if you can see this coming up. You can see that or not?
Yes.
Okay, now you'll find that, and Miguel, while I've got his attention, the actual exam questions, I know it's a long way down the track, but the exam questions, am I correct that they are basically put together based on the PowerPoints or the different presentations it's made?
Correct, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, out of the 60 questions that you have for your final exam, it's 10 questions from each module, which actually was prepared by your lecturer. Yeah. So your lecturer has sent in the questions to our accrediting body in the United Kingdom.
Yeah. So why we're saying this is some people right at the start of the program get very uneasy, about the final test or the final exam, but it's also open book. So but Miguel has plenty of stories on that where people actually failed not because they didn't have the knowledge, but they failed because they ran out of time. So it's very tempting, because it's open book, to try and look up in your notes the answer to every question, but that's not a good idea. The best way to do it is answer as many questions as you can, from your knowledge, and then the ones you're not sure of, you can go back and then look those up as required. So most of the questions will be based on the PowerPoint slides. So what we've also included, to widen your perspective and to give you lots of takeaways that you can use in your job or your expectation of different jobs going forward. Now, this is an example. So right at the start of module 1, you'll see there's a lot of pages of background work. And the first to start with is an extract from the Credit Skills Library, which we did quite some time ago. Can everybody see that on the screen? If you can, have somebody just...
Yes, I can see it.
Thank you. What I need to do is get the chat box up so we can pick that up. Yeah. Thanks. So what we did when Basel II came out, it was, as big a shock to us in the UK as to everyone else, and that the extensive nature of these recommendations from the Basel Committee. And there may be some persons who don't actually know the Basel Committee, so let me just stop there and say, if you go on to the website, and you'll see there's a reference in the notes quite frequently to this, but I'm giving it to you now. It's www.bis.org, so that's bis.org, and that stands for the Bank of International Settlements, and that's like the central banker's central bank, and that's located in Switzerland, in Europe, in the town of Basel, B-A-S-L-E. Now, why these are called Basel and not Basel, no one really knows. It's just the way it evolved historically. So when you go on the bis.org website, you'll see one of the major headings on the website is the Basel Committee for Banking Supervision. And you'll see frequently during your program, we give references to different papers by the Basel Committee. So the references are very, very good for you. And the good news is they're all free. You can download them. Some of them are sectionalized, where you can download different sections of risk. For example, if you are, like one person is saying, really interested in getting a deeper understanding of credit risk, the sections on credit risk, etc., etc. So what we tried to do was to make a summary of Basel II. So Basel II came out actually in 2004. And before that, the main thrust of the risk regulations was on credit. And credit, in terms of the credit risk, there were basically a set of principles going back all those years. And then in 1997, there was an amendment to the Basel recommendations, which covered the evolving market risk. And you see in the program, we've got a whole module on market risk. But what happened in 2004 is Basel released this huge document. It was over 250 pages, which covered a lot more of the risks. It covered, the credit risk, the market risk, and it covered operational risk. And it talked about the role of the supervisors. It talked about the role of the directors, et cetera, et cetera. So one of our first jobs was to try and make a review summary of the challenges that these would make in facing financial institutions. So there's lots of pages for you to read there, but what I'll do is I'll just go to the learning outcomes page so you can get an idea what we're trying to achieve by this. We're coming to it now. So when you work your way through this paper, you'll see what we're trying to highlight for you is the purpose and the intentions of this revised framework, and they called it International Convergence of Capital Measurement and Capital Standards, which is quite a mouthful there, but it's now become well known as Basel II. So as I say, Basel I was mainly credit risk with a little bit of market risk. Basel II, as we'll see, much wider perspective. And for the first time, we saw the direction of this work coming under what they called 3 pillars. Now, again, this is slightly confusing. You could think of it as 3 departments or 3 sections, but the Basel Committee, they called it 3 pillars. And just recently, the insurance companies globally, they've come out with their standard called Solvency II. And again, they've taken this 3-pillar approach, and there's quite a lot of similarities, within the insurance companies' work, drawing on the experience of the bankers and financial institutions' work from quite a while ago. So 3 pillars will be pillar 1, talks about the capital requirements that institutions should hold to cover their risk situations. And of course, this is very strongly adhered to by your own central banks, including the central bankers from Bahamas who are here today. And then the second pillar talks about the regulatory review. So this brings in the role of the supervisors from the central bank. It also brings in the role of the compliance people, and it also brings in the role of the internal audit in the financial institutions. Then the third pillar, which at that time was called market discipline, that's really lies at the foot of the directors of the organization. And this is all to do with transparency, which the Americans love. They love to talk about transparency, but they're sometimes not as transparent as they might be. I won't say much more than that because, Miguel's recording this. So transparency is within pillar 3. And as we'll see on some of the case studies, in pillar 3, this is where the directors should be conveying, not in minutiae detail, but they should be revealing their strategies for risk management. Now, if you want to get examples of this, the internet's a brilliant thing. And when we meet on our 3rd Saturday, what we'll do is we'll look at a leading international bank and we'll look at their transparency section extract, and we'll pick up some great ideas from that of how, how they're tackling their risk and what their risk methodologies are and who's accountable, not by person's name, but by their job title and how the structures work. So those 3 pillars were very different. The assessment and calculation of credit risk, market risk, and operational risk. And we'll see that that's easy for me to write down like that. But of course, in practice, it's very, very difficult indeed. The people who've worked in credit risk, you'll know the identification of credit risk isn't easy. Market risk can be very, very difficult. And my personal experience and that of many colleagues is that operational risk has proven the most difficult of all, because operational risk can be a huge spectrum of risks, you know, right through to some sort of tiny event, but right through to, as Miguel mentioned, you know, the catastrophes of the hurricanes, for example, you know, totally wiping out Tortola and the Virgin Islands, and then the other island of Antigua, Barbuda, was very badly hit, etc., etc. And then we've had the aspects recently of the COVID pandemic affecting our operations as well. We'll also include in this paper, which you'll see significance of the supervisory review process, how robust it should be and what they're looking for. And then, as I mentioned, under Pillar 3, the principles and extent of the disclosure requirements, and that really primarily falls at the foot of the board of directors. However, more and more we're seeing, you know, right through the inputs on this program, we're seeing much more input from senior risk professionals into the board level discussions on these aspects. So there's a lot of pages there, which I won't flick through, but I'll go on a bit further. Let me see. Page 25, I think it is. Yeah, so that's just a summary of the document that we've been talking about. And then the next document that's in there for you is the release in September 2010, which we're all expecting for some time, because when you've had Basel I and Basel II, you know, you can think inevitably there's going to be a Basel III, and this was it in 2010. And what we'll do just for the moment is we'll just have a quick look at the highlight table, which is in the appendix. So if you move forward into the appendix, and this appendix is a really good document. And what we'll find actually is that when we're looking at some of the Basel publications, the best part actually of a number of the Basel publications is what we would call the appendices, and they call them annexes. And we'll see an example of that under operational risk, where under operational risk, the Basel Committee are recommending, if you're not too sure how to start this, you could look at 8 different business lines to look at the management of operational risk. So you can save yourself, you know, a lot of brain work and work trying to figure out how we should start it by going into the operational risk paper, which we'll give you a reference on, and then heading for the annex where they set out their recommendation of the 8 different business lines that you could segregate your organization into. Now, you might only have 3 out of the 8, you know, in your particular organization, but it does give you, you know, the wide aspect of what it's all about. So here's a useful annex, which really summarizes Basel III. And what we'll see when it came out 2010, you can see the timescale is quite long there. So running right through to 2019. And some of the key things that were being introduced, which we'll discuss as we go through module 1, would be this new ratio coming in for financial institutions called a leverage ratio. And I'll give you a definition of that shortly, but that was new. What we have had for a long, long time, and the central bankers will know this, is the minimum capital. Can you see that further down there? The minimum total capital ratio for years and years and years has been 8%. That's the internationally recognized minimum capital required relative to the risk-weighted assets. So it's a balance sheet ratio where the central bank give you guidelines on the assets in your balance sheet and what risk weighting you put on them. And then you need to look at your capital relative to that. And the mathematical calculation from a simple start is you should have enough capital to be 8% of the total risk-weighted assets. Now, my experience in the Caribbean, right across the Caribbean, generally, most of the central banks and the financial institutions in the Caribbean, they've carried more than that. They've taken a more cautious approach, and they have been carrying figures closer to what the Basel Committee are recommending. Look, under Basel III, the recommendation, as you can see, is that the minimum capital should move from 8% to 10.5%. Now, I'll stop just there for the moment and ask if anyone from the central bank can put into the chat box if they know what the current capital adequacy ratio requirement is in the Bahamas at the moment. Anyone put that in? And I won't just pick on Bahamas, so the persons who are from other jurisdictions, if you know what it is, just stick it in the chat box. Thank you. Right, we got one new message coming in. Query is not certain. Anyone else? Not sure, but can find out. Yeah, great. Anyone else? Okay, well, don't worry. So they can find out for next Saturday when we meet, and that'll be interesting to do. So thank you both on that comment. So as I say, 8% for a long, long time. And then, you know, because of the global crisis that we experienced 2007, 2008, Darcy said he believes 8%. The recommendation was that the organization should carry a bit more capital as a reserve against contingencies. Now, there are two other very important developments under Basel III that weren't in Basel II. So when I talked about Basel II, I talked about credit risk, market risk, and operational risk, but you didn't hear me say very much about liquidity risk. And the reason for that is it wasn't strongly featured under Basel II. But we know what happened during the global crisis. You know, there was a lot of liquidity difficulties within financial institutions. So the Basel Committee took the opportunity under Basel III to bring in two new liquidity ratios. And you can see them at the bottom there: liquidity coverage ratio and net stable funding ratio. Now, I will give you some definitions of these in a few moments, but basically the liquidity will be covered in great depth, you know, in module 3, where they'll go much deeper into case studies on this liquidity aspect. Now, one thing we didn't mention during the introduction was, okay, there are advantages of Zoom because, you know, I'm like 5,000 miles away from you guys in the Caribbean at the moment. Normally, I have a global map behind me in my office, but been redecorating, so that's down for the moment. But it's been pretty useless, me having a global map, because I haven't been anywhere. You know, I used to go China, India, Malaysia, Africa, Caribbean, New York. I've been like all over the place with this type of work. But recently, London is as far as I've been. I've only been there twice in the last 2 years, whereas I used to go every more or less every week if I wasn't working overseas. But you can just maybe glimpse behind me over my shoulder. There is a picture there of the Piton, the two mountains in St. Lucia, and that's from quite a number of years ago. Now, what I didn't mention was that sitting here on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever, and I did put a program in there that we are recommended under like health and safety that we do an hour and then we take a break, you know, call it a comfort break. We'll make a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and we just have a short 10-minute break, maximum 10 minutes, and then we come back. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to mute the microphone and the video, and then we'll come back at 10 minutes after the hour. So thank you. 10-minute break. Okay, everyone, let's make a start again. So we sometimes have a breakup of sound when we have an interval. So can someone just confirm they can hear me okay, please?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Yeah, now there's been quite a bit of activity, good research. Thank you, Jessica, loud and clear, thanks. And some good activity there from Darcy and also from LaShawn. And LaShawn's confirmed the capital adequacy ratio guideline currently from the Central Bank of Bahamas. The target ratio is 17%. So you can see there's quite a good buffer or leeway, above the actual minimum that the Basel Committee are recommending. So that's quite a cautious approach from your own central bank. And then there's another paper which has been put into the chat box, which by Darcy, which maybe you could send that in the chat box to everyone. That would be very useful. There's a paper, a discussion paper there from the Central Bank of Bahamas on the subject matter of capital adequacy. So that's very helpful. Thank you very much. So if we go back to the materials, that was to give you a flavor of the Basel III changes moving on from Basel II. So what we're going to do now is move into some of the keynote slides where what you'll find all of the facilitators throughout the program will present some detailed slides for you. So my job, as I said earlier, with module 1 is to give us the wider perspective of the risks that we'll be facing. And then when you look at your timetable, you'll see each of the modules, we start to dive deeper into the various subject matter with subject matter experts, including presenters, from the Caribbean, giving us some of the very important aspects of the local interpretation and innovation with some of the regulations to fit more, with what you're facing there. So I'm going to start talking of this global regulation risk, and you'll see that some of what I'll be saying is we've already picked up under the Basel II and Basel III. So the objectives of this module 1 are to give you an advanced knowledge and critical understanding of the principles and practice of modern international enterprise risk management. Now, we've called this for many years, this program, we've called this part enterprise-wide risk management. And just recently, when some of the other Basel publications came out, they are calling it firm-wide risk management, which we were quite pleased about because it's the same thing. They're just using firm-wide as opposed to us using enterprise-wide. So you'll be exploring, recognizing, and appreciate the complexity. And it is a complex topic. There's no getting away from it. It's probably the most complex of the programs that we run. The complexity involved in managerial decisions relative to risk within business portfolios. So this could be a strategic decision that involves a lot of risk. For example, two banks coming together by way of a merger, or slightly riskier where it's an acquisition of another institution. So there'll be lots of risks there to look at. And again, we'll have a case study on two banks coming together. It could be a credit risk decision, on a larger lending project where maybe the lady who's with the legal experience, a good example of legal experience coming into a financial institution is on some of the bigger development projects. Now, this can be by way of a power station or a road, a new road with a toll situation, or it could be a very large hotel development, where there'll be a lot of parties involved if it's a construction project. So there'll be lots of legal issues in there, the supplies of things on time, the quality of this, et cetera, So there will be legal aspects there. And we mentioned power station. Power station has a lot of complex contracts involved, right through to the supply of the fuel to the power station, to what's known as the offtake. The offtake agreement is a legal document. For example, if the power station is generating electricity, which of course they usually are, then there'll be an offtake agreement by electric supply companies, and this will have price and volume in this offtake agreement. So again, another legal document to be looked at. So all of these things are complex and they all involve risk. Now, in 2004, we looked for a definition, because remember 2004 Basel II came out. So we did some research and looked for a definition that could be more applicable to lots of different business entities. And we found this is COSO, C-O-S-O, Enterprise Risk Management, Integrated Framework 2004. And you'll find this, the website is www.coso.org, and it's an American institution. And this is their definition from 2004. A process, so enterprise risk management is a process effected by an entity's board of directors, management and other personnel, applied in strategy setting and across the enterprise, designed to identify potential events that may affect the entity and manage risks to be within its risk appetite. Now we hear a lot of discussion on that nowadays, all those years later, about the risk appetite of different financial institutions, for example. You know, is it a low risk appetite? Is it medium? Or is it a high risk where they're really pushing for growth? So what's the risk appetite that should be set out by the directors? And to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of entity objectives. So that's quite a wide-based definition. Anyone got a comment on that definition? Yeah, throwing that at you, it's a bit of a tricky question. Yeah, but you can see it's, you know, it's wide in its perspective, and we're going to look in a little bit more detail at this in action as we progress. So what is the enterprise risk management framework? So if we're thinking on that broad perspective, the question is, where do we start? You know, people, well, we used to have lots of meetings. I mean, we don't have very many now, and quite often they're via Zoom at the moment. But when we used to have meetings of people getting together, well, let me give you just a quick example. I was in the marketing department of a certain bank a long time ago. And at the start of the day, in the marketing department head office, which is where I was, we would have a meeting convened where we would discuss what we were going to do during the day in terms of marketing events and issues. These meetings could last a long time. And then guess what? At the end of the day, we'd have another meeting to discuss what we'd actually achieved during the day. And I'm afraid to say quite often we hadn't achieved very much, because the meetings in the morning planning what we were going to be doing, you know, took so long we didn't have time to action things. So this can be very tricky, and it's the same in risk. Yeah, Dimitri's just sent a comment in there. Yeah, and that's true. And with this type of thing, it's very hard to know where we should start for enterprise risk management. But when you think we're starting on an enterprise-wide basis, we could look with the strategic objectives and what risk that might contain. Then we could look at the very, very important area of operations and the operational risk and processes in achieving the strategy that's been set down. Now, if it's a high risk, fast moving strategy, the operational risks generally are going to be greater than if it's a very conservative strategy and you know the type of people I mean, where tomorrow is going to be basically the same in business as yesterday, and yesterday was the same, you know, as a week ago and a year ago. So that's a very conservative strategy style where there shouldn't be a lot of risk. There is a risk, though, the risk of becoming obsolete, you know, because there's no change in this organization. But some organizations might not need to change, so that type of strategy would be okay. Now, if it's a higher risk strategy, you know, that's pushing for growth, or as I mentioned earlier, it's making a merger or making an acquisition. Now, an acquisition-led strategy approach will carry a lot of risks. It will carry people risk in the organization, and it will carry financial risks, because, you know, if you're acquiring something, you're going to have to pay for it. How is it going to be paid for? And will there be payback from, you know, the acquired company joining the parent company and generating sufficient returns? So strategy, operations, and then the very important area of reporting, so we can keep an idea what's going on with the strategy and with the operational side. And there's compliance coming in straight away, which will please the people who are working in compliance. Excuse me. So the compliance people will have a very important role there, looking at how the reporting systems are in place, how we're monitoring the cash flows, etc., of the organization, and how we're monitoring the process in operations, and how all these things should be compliant with the strategic direction of the business. Now you'll see this is a cube. Now this cube is from the COSO website. It's not something I invented. It's from the COSO website. And you'll see the three sides to it. Excuse me. We've just covered the top there. And then on the next section, now some persons attending this program in the past have been, you know, from very large organizations, and some of you are. So if you're looking at this from the organizational aspect, maybe you're working in head office, you would be looking at enterprise level. Maybe you're not, maybe you're looking at a divisional level of risks, or maybe some of you have mentioned to me, you're in charge of a certain type of business unit. So what's the risks within your processes? Or probably the most difficult area is if you're in charge of a subsidiary business. So are you managing the risks within the subsidiary in line with the risk management practices, you know, of the overall organization? Now this can cascade even further, where we start to look at the components. Now this is, for example, let's say you're managing a division, a certain division within the organization. What you do next is you look at the internal environment in which you're operating. So what we mean here is, yes, we've got this view of the global risks, the organizational risk, etc., but now we're getting down to the business of looking at the risks that actually face us. When I say us, I mean us within the division that we've just created of the organization. So this is where we look at the risks that we think we'll be facing within our own division of the business, or within our own business unit. Some persons mentioned personal lending, so you could classify that, you know, as a separate business unit, or maybe it's classified in your organization as part of retail credit. Anyone want to make a comment on that? The people working in personal credits, would you classify that as a separate business unit, or are you part of, say, the credit union?
Well, my structure at FCIB would be, it's a hub, so it's a separate unit,
yes,
but it's all interrelated with the other unit as well. So whereas we stand alone, we are still all at the top, supervised by one person.
Right.
So
So would this one person set the risk strategies to a degree, and then you've got to adopt those strategies, or is there any scope for you bringing in your own risk strategies?
well, on the personal side, it's very, very little scope for flexibility.
Right.
So the risk appetite, once the board would have set that risk appetite, the requirement is that the person in charge of the overall risk
Yes.
Articulate that to the hub leads, and then we have to reinforce that appetite
within the units. Yeah, I
Yes.
understand. Yeah, so really that's very good risk management control, isn't it? You know, provided it's being cascaded down in the correct manner and communicated properly. Yeah. Thank you for that comment. Yeah. So within your particular section, turning back to our department example, there'll be setting of objectives, and then what we're looking for then is, can we identify the potential risks that we could be facing? Now, this is where the Basel Committee recommend, and we've been recommending this for a long time, that you build up a database. You need to build up a database of risk events. Now, a lot of you will have this already. And then when you've got this database of experience, it will help you in making an assessment of the risks that you are likely to face. Now, I know there's going to be some unknown risks, and we're going to talk quite a lot about that. But for the moment, we're talking about, you know, identifying the risks that we've been facing. What's the level of risk within it? Is it low, medium, high, or very high? And then what sort of response have we made to the risks? So can we learn from these risks? Can we learn about the frequency of the risks? Can we learn how we can try and mitigate the risks? Then we'll have the control activities, including the compliance section, information and communication, just like the gentleman just said there. Obviously, from the top, the communication will be vital in terms of what the risk appetite is feeding into this hub, as he described it, and then the units within the hub. You know, how is this information being monitored and fed back upwards to the overall credit control section. Now, this is one of the most important slides, I think, in terms of risk management. Because what we're trying to show here is right at the center of this wheel is the board. And just like you mentioned a few minutes ago, the board setting the risk policies and the governance practices, as we'll see under module 6, there'll be a lot of discussion on corporate governance issues and actions and case studies, but really it's got to start, and we say this frequently, and you'll have heard it said lots of times, the tone has to be set from the top, yeah? Now, unfortunately, our experience has been in lots of different countries. Unfortunately, in some cases, the board of directors don't really seem to be that interested in the risk policies. You know, they're more interested in driving the business forward, you know, getting extra sales, getting extra profits, trying to generate extra bonuses, etc., etc. And they don't really have a good focus on risk. As we'll see from some of the case studies during this program, you know, if you don't consider the risk, you can get yourself into some terrible problems. And one of the case studies, the particular organization, because of the risk it took on, it failed, you know, totally failed, although it was a very successful business in the past. So the answer is the board of directors should set the policies, and there should be a risk policy document. And those persons working in the central bank, if you move into a supervisory role where you actually do site visits, the things that you'll be asking for are where's your credit risk policy guide? Yeah? Where's your credit risk manual, I might call it, or whatever it is. And this will be an important document. And it shouldn't just be all the credit people putting down all the narrative of what they'll be doing. What it should start with is the communication and signed off by the board of directors what their risk policy is, what their risk strategy is, and what their levels of risk appetite are on certain sectors and certain types of credit products. And this will be the same right through the risks that the business is facing. So there should be an operational risk manual as well, and a market risk manual, and maybe some other manuals that they have on reputational risk. Now, the next part is slightly contentious, and sometimes people on this program don't agree with me. Well, that's fine, because I invented this wheel, so it's not necessarily going to be totally correct. So what I said, a good place to start with, after we've got these risk policies and governance, would be to look at this section here, the identification of risks. Now that's before setting the strategy to manage the risks, because the wheel's going to go this way. Now, anyone got views on this straight away, that they think, no, we should be starting with the strategy? If you don't want to speak, just put it in the chat box. So I'm quite open to discussion on this.
I think I would agree with you. I think it would be important to identify what the risk is prior to making the strategy.
Excellent, thank you very much. That's a plus coming in for me straight away. Anyone want to counter that? Based on your experiences, do you think strategy is a better place to start?
No, I think I'm sorry, Mr. Shackley, I agree with my colleague also with identifying the risk.
Yeah.
I think once you've already, this is my opinion, I think once you've already identified the risk, then you can create a strategy.
For managing the risk,
yeah, to manage the risk, absolutely, and not vice versa.
Excellent, thank you very much. Yeah. So I have had that comment in the past about the strategy first, but I'm pleased that both the ladies mentioned that they would identify risk first, which is really good, because if we think back to that cube that we were talking about, what we're trying to do really is identify the risks specifically to our organization. So I know I'll be talking generalistically about all this, that, and the other, but at the end of the day, as a risk manager in your organization, what you're interested in is the risks in your organization. So a really good place to start to get a good focus on this would be to try and identify the risks that your organization will be facing. And it's not going to be easy. To identify the risks is difficult. Then can we measure the risk? So that's difficult as well. By measuring the risk, we mean what's kind of the level of impact of it. So can we quantify the impact? Will it be a low impact risk of say high frequency, or will it be lesser frequent but higher impact? So trying to identify those risks. Then this gets harder. Is there any way we can think of shifting these risks, or trading off these risks, or mitigating these risks? We'll have a section on this later on, but really quite often you may think of some insurance, for example, to try and help mitigate the risks there, or it might be the implementation of better controls, or it might be some of the risks you've identified is the organization doesn't have a business continuity plan. So, to manage and mitigate that risk, what you need to do is get a team together to come up with a business continuity plan for the organization. A contingency plan, yeah, very, very important. So then we'll go on to the strategy as you suggested. So this will be a good strategic plan. Why? Well, it will be, provided we take notice, of this first identification here. People love strategy. It's great fun, yeah. We can all sit down, let's get around the table and we'll talk about business strategy. It's great, because there's no hard thing to it. We can have all these ideas and we can talk for hours and hours and maybe nothing will come out of it. sometimes you get somebody who's more forthright, you know, they might start to use a whiteboard, or in the old days, a flip chart. Nowadays, you'd probably be doing it on the computer, of what strategies we should come up with. So if we're focusing on the risk, it should be much more focused discussion. And we're going to set out our key objectives for managing these risks. So it's now starting to take shape. This is a good risk management plan. And then we come to the more difficult area of the implementation issues. And you know, in life, implementation is probably, well, it is the hardest thing, I'm sure. In any business, whatever business you've got, you know, we can come up with this, we come up with that and the other, but the actual implementation is where it starts to get really tough. And are there any corporate governance issues within the implementation? And then the next step is where it generally falls at people like your good selves, is the management. And that's even more difficult because you're trying to manage the implementation, which is a difficult topic to start with. So what processes are there in place? We might need some new processes coming in. We might, you know, need some IT support for the processes. And what leadership have we got on the processes? We were involved in a project, it's about 3-4 years ago now, where the two senior leaders on this project, and we were commissioned to do some work on the project. The biggest problem we encountered was these two leaders. They both had totally opposite cultural backgrounds, and they both had totally opposite business backgrounds, and they had totally opposite, you can guess what I'm going to say, you know, implementation ideas. So the whole thing was an absolute shambles. It was terrible. So what outputs are we looking for there? So within this processes, we can put in some time frames or milestones if you prefer it. Do we need any innovation to help us with this? What about the people? You know, quite often the people working in risk management like yourselves, you know, they're trying to develop their skills, and some of the areas are very, very difficult. You need to hang on your hat when you get into module 3 and you start to look at those liquidity ratios I was mentioning. You know, there's some mathematics coming in there, and we're not all that skilled on the mathematical side. But what you need to do as a risk manager is you don't necessarily have to work the maths, but you need to be sure that the person who is conveying the mathematics, you know, really understands the calculations, and the calculations are valid. And again, we'll have an example case study on this, where the methodology appeared to be sound, but it wasn't, because it was based on flawed data. So the data inputs were flawed, but in terms of risk management, using this particular model, it looked okay because the model was okay, but the model result, the model output was flawed in terms of risk management because of the inputs. Excuse me, if that makes sense. Excuse me a second. So we might need some training to support these people skills. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, we've got to have a database. The Basel Committee recommend a minimum of 3 years data, and 5 years is better. And again, the gentleman who mentioned, you know, his hub framework, so all the units there, they can be helping to build up a good database on their credit experiences. And again, when I was in banking a long time ago, one of the recommendations I made was on business accounts. What we should do is we should put the data in from the business accounts in terms, you know, of what the sales were, in terms of what the gross profit margins were, what the profit margins were, and we could build up a database of expectation when we were handling new credit requests. And I thought that would be a really good thing to do. Guess what? The director said, well, Keith, it sounds a good idea, but we won't do it because there's no point, because every business is different. So I said, well, that's the whole point of this. We know businesses are different, but you know, there are certain businesses working in the same sector, and the bank at the time had over 2,000 branches. So you can imagine this wonderful database we could get, which would give us guidelines on different things. And believe it or not, farmers in the UK, they've had a database like that for more than 50 years, where if I was going to start a dairy farm, and I know you don't have any farming to speak of in Nassau, for example, but in some of the other islands, St. Lucia, for example, when I first went to St. Lucia, the banana crops were about 50% of the whole island output, and tourism, you know, gradually developed after that. But on the farming side, for example, if we were going into dairy farming, you know, where they've got the dairy cow which is milked to give the milk production, the farmers knew the statistics. They knew, you know, what type of cow, whether it was a Frisian or a Guernsey or a Jersey or whatever, would give certain levels of output and have certain statistics. So these databases are really good. It'll help you in your measurement of risk. And if something comes in way off the scale, immediately it should give you a red flag, as the Americans call it, you know, in terms of risk management. Because risk management, you know, we're often looking for the unusual, aren't we? We're looking for something that just doesn't seem right, although maybe, you know, the department head or what section we're looking at as risk managers, they say, oh yes, everything's okay, blah, blah, blah. But what you're doing as a risk manager, you're looking for unusual things. You're looking for things that don't look and fit in with your expectation. Then one of the hardest jobs as a risk manager is overcoming the financial barriers that you will face. So people typically will say to you, well, you know, we like your plan. You've done a good job identifying the risks. We can see your strategy fits in nicely. You've got some good processes in place. Looks as if you've got the people with some supportive training, etc., etc. But, and this is a question you're waiting for, you know, how much is all this going to cost us in terms of your risk management plan, etc.? What's the impact on cash flow? Well, generally, the best way to answer that is we have to take a short or long-term view. If you're taking a short-term view, the cash flow is probably going to deteriorate. Why? Because you'll have capital expenditure to support your risk management plan. Longer term, it's been proven longer term, for example, on the stock market listed companies, that it's been proven longer term, these large companies that can show they've got good risk management practices in place definitely have a higher market value than those that don't. And that's been proven statistically. So what we're looking for here is new ways of trying to value measurements coming in to the plan. So it's not just about the cash flow. We've got to bring in some other value-based measurements, which we will talk about as we progress through these 3 Saturdays, particularly on the last Saturday. We'll look at a case study on that. Any questions on this wheel, or are we all comfortable with that? So it seems quite logical. Now, what I'm going to do now is just give you an executive overview of what we've started to talk about earlier when we first met, about the Basel II and 3 new challenges. So what was underpinning all that? Thank you, Gillian. All clear coming in there, thanks. So the Basel Committee objective with Basel III, the most recent one, was to strengthen the global capital framework. Now, the reason for this is, as we said earlier, and you know yourselves, in 2007 and 2008, we had this terrible global financial crisis, which to a degree was totally unexpected, caught a lot of USA problems in the UK problems as well, and spread globally. So the Basel Committee intended under Basel III to raise the resilience of the banking sector by strengthening the regulatory capital framework, building on the 3 pillars of Basel II. Now, why I put that in italics is because if you're building on the 3 pillars of Basel II, logically, in order for you to have a good comprehension of what Basel III is about, for when you're asked by some of your colleagues, if you're building on 3 pillars of Basel II, you're going to need to understand Basel II, you know, to give you the building blocks for moving up to Basel III. People have asked me in the past, why doesn't the Basel Committee just issue one new thing and forget all these others? Because when you go on the BIS website and take a look at the Basel, and indeed during our program, you'll see the number of references to the Basel publications is quite comprehensive. And the answer to that is they have never agreed to do that. So it's always been, you know, a comprehensive building up of recommended practices. So this Basel III would raise both the quality, so that's important, and quantity of the capital base, and also to enhance liquidity management and risk coverage. So that's a very, very, very important paragraph there. Quality of capital to be improved, because as we'll see in some financial institutions, there's some capital which consists of some type of instruments that we've never even heard of. We don't understand what they are, and are they really capital in the true sense? So the quality of the capital needs to be improved, and also the quantity, which we've already been discussing, the recommendation minimum 10.5%, moving up from 8. And then the liquidity ratios coming in, and then the risk coverage will be the leverage ratio. So here we are, these are underpinned by leverage ratio, which serves as a backstop to the risk-based capital measures. Why? Because it's intended to constrain excess leverage in banking system and provide an extra layer of protection against model risk and measurement error. Now, leverage in a business sense, so if we were looking at a normal business customer, and I said, let's take a look at the balance sheet, and let's take a look at the leverage. Leverage in a normal balance sheet, so I shouldn't say normal, so in a commercial type business balance sheet, leverage, if you're not sure, you want to make a note of this, leverage is the total liabilities divided by the net worth of the business, which is basically the capital base. So in any balance sheet, and forgive me if you're wizards at this, on our last program, we had 2 forensic accountants, which, you know, knew everything inside out about the balance sheets. But in a balance sheet, whatever business it is, whether it's a small corner shop on Bay Street in Nassau there, or, you know, it's a big business like the Atlantis group of hotels, the balance sheet basically is a list of the assets, all the assets, and generally it's categorized into current assets and long-term fixed assets to give you total assets. And then on the other side will be the liabilities, which will be again categorized into current, which is less than 12 months, and longer term. Now, when you add all the liabilities together and you take that figure away from the total assets, you'll get a figure which I like to call represents the net worth of the business. So that's a business net worth. Same in personal. So if I'm working in personal credit and I'm dealing with a customer, yes, I want to know their income, their expenses, their track record, KYC, all of that sort of business. But I'd also be interested in trying to extract a personal balance sheet. And you could do this yourselves in about 10 minutes or so. Your personal balance sheet would be listing the things that you own, that's your assets. That might include some real estate. And then on the other side, listing what you owe, so that's your liabilities. And then hopefully when you take the liabilities away from your total assets, there's a balancing figure, which is your personal net worth. Now, ideally in life, you would want to increase your personal net worth each year. But regrettably, life's not like that, is it? You know, life's up and down, and this will be quite volatile. Same in business. Ideally in business, each year, we'd want to see the business net worth improving. So that's leverage in the balance sheet sense. It's all the liabilities divided by the net worth. So it's a ratio. In financial institutions, the leverage ratio is different in that the leverage ratio is where we make the mathematics in a slightly different way, which we're going to be looking at in just a moment. So these are complex topics, as we've been discussing. Different countries and regions will have some, unique problems. And all our work since 1989, when we've been going to all these different countries, the starting point for practically every workshop is there'll be someone says, "Oh yes, Keith, well, you're from the UK, but it's different here." Yeah, and I would say to that, well, yes, it's different here, it's different everywhere, but there are certain principles that will remain the same, no matter where we are. Question come in, is Basel mandatory? The answer to that is no. However, it's adopted by the relevant central bank, yeah? So your central bank of Bahamas, in putting out their guidelines, some of their guidelines will be mandatory, and we can ask Quarry for his opinion on that. And some might be just guidelines. Or Darcy, see Darcy in the chat box, but there was also a discussion paper on this matter. So in setting standards, and there's another one from Darcy, which says you might find this guideline from the central bank useful, and it says guideline. So to answer your question, it might be and it might not, but certainly the guidelines from the Basel Committee are not mandatory. They're different to the Sarbanes-Oxley from the US, which is a set of rules and regulations. Basel, as I said earlier, in our job over this whole program for you, is to give you an international perspective of the recommended best risk management practices. Yeah, thank you. So bearing in mind what we just said there, however, Basel 2 and 3 will provide frameworks, and that's the benefit of it, yes? Darcy's put into the box there, good reads. So I recommend you have a look at that before we meet next Saturday, and I'll have a look at it as well. Because they're providing frameworks, same as the central bank will, for firm-wide risk management to include all the risks facing the business. Now, why have I put 2 question marks after that? All the risks facing the business. Any ideas, anybody? Why have I said it'll provide frameworks for firm-wide risk management to include all the risks facing the business? Question mark. So we just got over 5 minutes to run. So here's a tricky question towards the end of our session for today. Anyone? Well, it's simply, can anyone foresee all the risks facing the business? And the answer to that's got to be no. Because as we said earlier, there's a galaxy out there of risks, and some of them are unknown, some of them we've never faced before. like the COVID, for example. We never faced that sort of thing before. I mean, we had this bird flu from Asia in Europe, and we had other things, but we never had anything like we've experienced over the last 2 years. I like trying to use diagrams where we can to try and simplify things, and it's a benefit to you and also benefit if you're in discussion with colleagues and they might say to you, what is Basel II? Well, Basel II on the next 2 diagrams, I think you get a good summary, I hope. So the first one is, there's your pillar 1, pillar 2, and pillar 3. So this is going back to Basel II. Remember, not Basel III, Basel II. Pillar 1 talks about the minimum capital requirements, covering credit risk, market risk, and operational risk. Pillar 2 talks all about supervisory review processes, and this features a lot, within our risk management program. And then pillar 3, as I said earlier, is about disclosure and market discipline coming from the board of directors. So this diagram is what we're going to finish on. Now, I apologize if at first sight it looks incredibly complicated, but it was my best effort to try and summarize over 250 pages, into one visual that would be useful, I hope, for your good selves, and also useful for discussion. So here we go. Look, Basel II, the strategies for Basel II are the 3 pillars. Pillar 1, the capital strategy. Pillar 2, the supervisory review. And pillar 3, the disclosure. So pillar 1, you can see, comes down to those 3 areas: credit risk, market risk, and operational risk. And I will give you more information on that when we meet next week, because there's certain different ways you can tackle this, and we'll talk about that. Pillar 2, look, here is the answer for the compliance people. Can you see here that compliance is coming in to make sure, under the supervisory review, compliance are checking on these 3 areas of risk calculations, and compliance are also checking on risk management processes, risk culture, and risk event handling. So compliance is a big job. It's a big job, particularly under the Basel requirements. So what are we looking for? We're looking for the creation of a risk culture. Excuse me. Now I have to say at this point, not at the expense of business, right? And Miguel is very strong on this. He doesn't want risk overshadowing everything that we do, and that's quite correct. The organization shouldn't be so risk culture aware that it doesn't go forward to, improve and generate more business. So risk doesn't take a back seat, but risk needs to work on alongside, with a good risk culture, alongside the business development people. Risk management, are we compliant with the regulations that's been given to us, usually from the central bank? What's our organizational structure? Do we have a process for risk categorization, assessment of risks? Are there any areas of process improvement? And here we go to what I said earlier. What about the risk events? How are they handled? How are they monitored? Do we have a risk log or a risk register, or whatever you like to call it, which is just like the old ship's register of the ancient mariners, sailing across the ocean? They'd have their register of events during the voyage, which they had to submit, the captain would have to submit and sign off at the end of the voyage. And it's the same here. We need a good risk log, and we'll give you some headings for this as we progress during the program. We record the events, we record the management, we record the statistics, and we can bracket these together, which I haven't got on the screen, and write down what lessons can we learn. What lessons can we learn from the risks that we faced in the past? we shouldn't just think, oh, that was a terrible risk, we put it in a box, you know, and get rid of it out there, or we put it in the folder, put it in the filing cabinet, and we never think about it again. Is there anything we can get out of it? And you'll see interspaced in our program with you, we have a number of risk case studies where we're trying to identify the risks, and we're trying to get risk lessons, risk management lessons out of the case studies. So the final point will be this risk event database, which you've been talking about. Then what about the board of directors and senior management? Well, here we go. Pillar 3 is the disclosure. And they should be disclosing, and it's generally in the annual report and accounts. What are their strategies? What are their key risk strategies and performance for the capital adequacy position of the institution, the risk management of the institution, and the handling of risk events? Okay, any questions, quick questions on this chart, and then we'll finish because I know we're around midday and we can pick up more next week. But any sort of burning questions on this, or is everybody okay so far? Nothing so far, just some thanks coming in to Darcy for the research, thank you. Jessica saying this is great information, thank you, that's great. Okay, Miguel, I wonder if he's still there or. Everything is clear so far, thank you. I'll just try and get Miguel if he's there. Miguel, are you there? Please.
Yes, my good man. I'm sorry. My apologies. I'm here.
It's okay. We're just 2 minutes over.
Okay, not a problem.
So we just finished on that lovely diagram that you either love or hate. I think you probably hate, but you've seen it a lot before. Okay, very good. Thank you. And we'll see you next week. And if you get a chance to read that paper recommended by Darcy, that would be really good. I'll have a look at it myself.
Not a problem. Thank you, and thanks to everybody for
participating
today. Thank you so very much. So we see you next week, same time, same place.
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Orlando.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks for showing. Yeah.